Hey, what's up? This is an updated Ho-Oh strategy. Came straight from the Chinese player base from a player whose name I probably can't pronounce and I won't attempt to. Um, as always, special thank you to my teammate Secret GG for helping me translate these Billy videos. The strategy is pretty nifty. I forgot to hit a repel there. Basically functions the same way that the Togekiss Poliwrath Chandelure strategy does, in that you have Poliwrath taking care of the ads. You have Dragonite instead of Togekiss tanking the attacks that would otherwise go for Poliwrath. And then you have Rotom Heat in the Chandelure role, where it will just set up and then spam attacks once it's fully set up. The nice thing about this team is it doesn't require any items. There may be a save that you need in certain conditions for Poliwrath. If the order gets messed up and Dragonite's in the air, you can't swap out and it eats a Thunderbolt. It can feint from that, so you can, in that case, special defense, X special defense on the Poliwrath. You could also potentially run Light Screen on the Rotom and anticipate it if you want to go purely itemless, but I would say so far I've run this about 20 times and I've only ran into the instance where Poliwrath gets Thunderbolted once. So it's pretty rare that that happens, and otherwise it's totally no items. Additionally, the IVs required for this team are pretty measly, so it's a pretty inexpensive team to run. You'll see the Rotom that I'm running. I got a decent deal on one, so I got plus 15 in all the bulk stats and then 25 and 25 in speed. It's modest. That's pretty darn cheap for a Rotom or any setup sweeper Pokemon. So that's very different from the Gliscor Chandelure strategy, where you're building what's basically a 5x31 Chandelure and risking crits and all that sort of stuff. So this is a very inexpensive Pokemon. The Dragonite basically just needs a plus special defense nature and then decent bulk stats. I got a decent deal on one that was already leveled up. I leveled up a multiscale one to test, and multiscale is by far better, but not required by any means. So you can run inner focus. Multiscale makes it a bit more reliable, but I would say is not necessary. If you want something more long-term, I would recommend getting something with multiscale, especially if you have the funds, but definitely not required. You'll kind of see how it plays out with multiscale. The only Pokemon that really requires higher IVs is the Poliwrath, just because it will be tanking damage. Things get a little bit sketchy after Belly Drum. If Entei leads off in extreme speeds, there's a risk that crit can... I forget what instances. There's instances where you'll take an E-speed sometimes from Entei and other things. So basically, whenever you're taking damage with Poliwrath, there's more opportunities for Poliwrath to get hit. It's got to recover HP from Drain Punch. I would recommend, you definitely need 31 attack. You want adamant, and then I would recommend 20 plus at least bulk stats. I bred one. I got some deals on cheap breeders. I was going to try and breed something worse. I haven't limit tested sort of what you can get away with the Poliwrath, but you may be able to get away with something as weak as 15-15, especially if you don't care that much about reliability. You know, you're not doing this on Charm. You can just reset the fight early if Poliwrath feints, or try to revive or save it that way. But yeah, it's pretty straightforward, pretty cheap to breed. You can ignore the speed stat. I did not, just because I wanted a better Poliwrath. You can ignore the speed EV. I've set this one up to be specifically for Ho at this point. You can get away with an E4 Poliwrath pretty easily. I've maxed the bulk through the HP stat and the attack stat. You'll see that the speed does not matter for most of these. You can do something with the Rotom where you have the Rotom be slower than the Poliwrath, so you can push into phase 2 and then have Rotom set up a nasty plot to save you a turn in phase 2. But this strategy is so quick that I'm not going to bother optimizing that much further. There's definitely room for improvement upon what I've done already, and from what the other video was. But we'll just get into it, and you'll kind of see what this all looks like. Make sure that your Pokemon are in order. You always want Rotom on the right side so that it is not getting hit by ads. And we're going to start. There's a little bit of a wrinkle in phase 2 that you'll see, where Poliwrath isn't just sacrificed, it stays alive. You're going to run rest on it, but I'll talk about the moveset sort of as we get into it. And as always, there's going to be a guide in the description, Pokepaste, a little bit more detail on IVs and EVs. Dragonite's just full HP special defense, because that's what's going to be tanking most of the time. Dragonite is our designated safeguard for turn 1. Polyrath is always going to belly drum, and some strategies I've seen use Reflect on Rotom. I don't think it's necessary. I believe it does not mitigate the damage from this initial fire. I forget the name. I think it's Sacred Fire. Darn strings not working for Ho-Oh's attacks. But basically, I tried running Reflect to mitigate that damage to reduce some of the variability with Polyrath. You don't necessarily need to. There might be some saves for it, but we'll kind of see. So Dragonite's running Leftovers, Polyrath is running Black Belt, and Rotom is running Magnet just to boost their respective stats. The first turn is the only turn where everything's set. Second turn also is pretty set as well, but Polyrath is basically always going to Drain Punch one of the beasts if they're present. Dragonite's always going to switch into Polyrath's position if it's on the ground, and Rotom is always going to Nasty Plot if Ho-Oh is going to take off because you're going to be slower than Ho-Oh and the Thunderbolt will miss. Or if you know that Bounce isn't going to hit because Dragonite's going to use Substitute, which denies Bounce and saves some damage in the instance that it's tanking a Thunderbolt or Extreme Speed. You'll kind of see that play out here. We know that on turn 3 that Ho is going to land, so we can sneak in a Thunderbolt. Where if the first beast is fainted at this point from Polyrath, then you can also Waterfall Ho for some initial damage, and that's what really speeds up this strategy compared to a 2 Pokemon strategy. Dragonite is always going to Substitute when it lands. It's just a useful move to hit the ground with. I've seen other things use Tailwind. I just like Substitute. It makes the strategy a bit more consistent in terms of overall damage taken, much less risk of crits if a Thunderbolt hits pretty hard. And then, like I said, we're going to Thunderbolt the Ho as it lands for some initial damage. The strategy works so fast that a lot of the time you'll get to a point where you don't necessarily want to push to phase 2 with an add up. I think they have reduced damage taken. It's always a mess when you try it. You can get away with it if it's just Suicune with this strategy because of how Dragonite and Polyrath will be tanking everything in phase 2. So if you really want to save turns, you can try pushing if you get Suicune last, that 1 in 3 chance you get Suicune last. But it's totally not necessary. You'll want to stall and get into phase 2 cleanly, especially if you have Substitute up from Dragonite. If you want to get Polyrath fully rested, that's always good. So we're back to a situation. Beast is out, Dragonite's on the ground, so we're just going to Drain Punch. Rotom's going to Nasty Plot in order to keep building up. I think at +4 you're already maxed out, but you just have to stall the turns anyway. One thing that you can do is Drain Punch PP with pressure. You only get 5 off. If you mess up or something, you run out of PP with Drain Punch, which can be problematic in some cases. So could be a good idea to use a PP up or max on Drain Punch. And potentially save you that problem. Sometimes the Substitute won't break depending on the situation, like if Suicune uses Helping Hand. And Dragonite's going to stay on the ground, and that can change turn orders a little bit. That's another variable. So Dragonite's in the air. It's going to land and use Substitute. We know that Ho is going to land the next turn, and we have a free turn. So we can use our damaging moves, Waterfall in this case for Polyrath, and Thunderbolt for Rotom. One of the reasons that Rotom is so good in this position is it's got Levitate, so it doesn't have to worry about the Earth power in in those situations, so it's never really a target for that portion of the AI. I think that's what ends up making it that better option. And so you can get away with it not taking attacks, and then the wrinkle of these 2 healing while staying up in phase 2. Let it just set up freely. So right here we're going to swap Drain Punch and just going to stall a turn. You could use something like Reflect here where you're already maxed out. I'm just not going to for consistency's sake, so you can see what it's like without it. So in reality, Rotom will only need those 2 moves, Nasty Plot and Thunderbolt. Raikou should be taken care of here, and then Dragonite's pretty healthy. If for some reason you got crit or something else, you can potentially stall turns and like say swap Poliwrath and Rotom's position now because their positions don't matter. Poliwrath doesn't have a good stall move where Rotom can just click Nasty Plot whenever. In this case, I know that Ho is going to land. Dragonite's the slowest, so we're not going to be able to get a move off with Dragonite until we've pushed to phase 2. So I think here I'm just going to click Waterfall on Ho to guarantee the push. I'm going to click Roost on Dragonite. There's some cases where you'll end this with Sub, and then you won't even have to deal with a burn. But one Pokemon's going to take a burn here. It's either going to be Poliwrath or Dragonite. I haven't quite figured out exactly how the AI works for that. Either instance, you'll be able to heal that back up. Dragonite's running Rest and Roost to deal with anything that comes its way, and Poliwrath will have Rest. The only thing you'll have to play around and consider potentially is how the turns work for Rest. You'll have to swap with one and then make sure that the rested Pokemon is burning a sleep turn. If you're switched with one and it's still asleep, it does not count as a sleep turn. It needs to explicitly state the Pokemon's asleep. You'll see how that looks in a second. So we'll see who Ho picks here. We didn't get the switch off, so I'm guessing it's going straight for Poliwrath. Yeah. So that's a pretty straightforward one. We are just... Oh, and a crit. So that was a little bit scary. And I've had my team chat open that whole time. I guess a lot of people are going to make the video. So that was luckily not that much. You can't even see the damage because of the strings problem there. This can potentially be a problematic situation because Ho can pick other moves at this point. You'll see in a second. But we are going to rest. It's going to target Poliwrath. Because its health is low enough, it can pick other moves from its move pool. And I don't know what's going to choose, but we'll go with Nasty Plot first. It might do Earth Power or something, and then we don't have to worry about anything. And we need one Nasty Plot from Rotom to get it to max damage on Thunderbolt. Yeah, so that it hits with Sacred Fire. Luckily, Dragonite can do either perfectly. This creates a pretty interesting situation, just because you have burns on both, and that's a lot of chip, a lot quickly. With the rest this late, so we're resting on turn 1 here. We're going to have to hit a rest with Dragonite, so we're not going to be burning a sleep turn on Poliwrath. It shouldn't be a problem, but we'll see what happens. Dragonite's going to start tanking Solar Beams now, which has a 4 times resist to, and can just shrug those off all day. You'll see in a second. There is a possibility now that Ho-Oh can pick Dragonite to attack, though I don't think it's likely. I think it would need to hit a lot harder with that Sacred Fire. So we'll see what happens. We're going to rest, then we're going to swap with Poliwrath. It's still going to need 2 full turns of sleep because we're switching once, and we only need the one Nasty Plot from Rotom to get to +2 for max damage. Luckily, it is a Solar Beam on Poliwrath that Dragonite tanks no problem. It'll use rest here and get back to full HP. And at this point, the fight's pretty much won. There's different kind of ways you get pushed. You'll just have to figure out as you're getting into phase 2 and what happens in the beginning of phase 2, what to happen. I can't write a prescriptive guide for all of those things. Variability too much based on how frail your Pokemon are if you want super budget. I do have pretty good confidence that this strategy could work for pretty decent budget team. Poliwrath is probably going to end up being the most expensive there. But now that I'm going to just click rest on Poliwrath so it gets a sleep turn. It doesn't really matter what you click there, though. It's just going to say it's asleep. We don't necessarily... Well, we would theoretically have to eventually allow Dragonite to get out of rest as well, but the fight's going to be won before then anyway, so... You see it's below 25% there. Another Solar Beam for Dragonite. Even if that crits a couple times, Dragonite's still going to survive for that and the additional Fire Chip. So it's going to be a 5-turn phase 2 instead of a multi-turn ordeal with Gliscor and Chandelure. And then if you do have the means, obviously I would totally recommend the multi-scale on Dragonite. That's going to be a big consistency boost. You'll see it. You're going to hit multi-scale is going to proc multiple times because of leftovers gain. But you can see this is a level 98 Dragonite. It's not even max level, and it's IVs. It's like 1 HP IV, and then but the 27%, 27 IV, and then the 10% from the calm boost on the special defense makes it very, very tanky. Then obviously the type resist makes it that much better. So this is gonna be the second turn, I believe, of sleep from Poliwrath. We can see down here, Poliwrath is fast asleep. Yeah. So it's guaranteed wake up next turn. So I'll just stall with Rotom so you can see what that looks like. So Dragonite would need to not take any, or would need to be the one not switching. Poliwrath would have to swap to then wake Dragonite up. But you can see it's already one here. I'll click rest so you can see that. We'll shift the Dragonite. Oops. Ooh. Rest. Shift the Dragonite. And we don't want a Thunderbolt. We're just going to nasty plot to stall. But we're talking, like 10, 12% damage between the Solar Beam and there's the Wake Up. And the additional Fire Chip damage for Dragonite makes this pretty trivial to tank instead of relying on Chandelure trying to be bulky. And so we wake up, we rest, and that's what it would look like if you needed to get another rest off for some situation. With the Chinese guide called for 2 nasty plots, which gives you a little bit. You have to survive that one extra turn. Then you have to survive for 6 turns instead of 5. With just 1 nasty plot, you're pretty chill. It's hard to lose in phase 2 once you get there if you have a somewhat clean phase 2 entering it. So. That's pretty much the strategy. It's super quick. This is what I'm going to be using from here on out. I've got 4 alts that I can run this on. It's just very reliable. Requires virtually no items, maybe a special defense in some cases. If you know that Raikou is going to get a clean hit on your Poliwrath, that can save you. You can just skip it if you want to and go next and just beat Ho on the next attempt. I've run this about 20 times. I've only seen that happen once. It might happen fewer times than that. It might happen more times than that. I'm still going to pick this one over the Gliscor Chandelure strategy. So, yeah, thanks for watching. Let me know how it goes. If you run a super budget version of this team and it ends up working for you, let me know what your IVs and EVs are. I'm curious. I can try to put together what the minimums are for players that want to get Ho done on a budget, especially if you're new. This is going to be a super useful way to beat Ho. So, yeah, thank you for watching, and let me know how it goes.